Author Services, Nature Publishing Group, Gordon McPherson, Director of Conference Quality, IEEE, and Jeffrey Beal, Scholarly Communications Librarian and Associate Professor at the University of Colorado, Denver, and myself, Don Samulak, President of U.S. Operations of Editage Cactus Communications. This session is in some way to be a continuation of Jeffrey's keynote, and in other ways to go way beyond what he had covered in the keynote, if that's possible, because he basically covered everything. But I want everybody to be aware that this is the first of two sessions. So this session, we're going to be doing an exploratory surrounding predatory publishing. Then we'll have a 5-minute quick break, and then there's another session right after on predatory author services. Well, they are linked together. They are very different presentations, and the predatory author services session is going to actually involve an industry call to action with a vision of moving forward of how, in fact, we can address these issues. And I encourage everybody who's here to stay and to bring your colleagues in as well to have a frank conversation surrounding this industry call to action. I think it's important. I think it will be a turning point for us in these conversations. So, with that said, this session is on the landscape of predatory publishers and exploration of concerns. And I have to say, from my opinion, that Jeffrey Beal's presentation and keynote, I've heard a lot of talks that Jeffrey has given over the years, and I personally believe it's probably one of his best presentations ever. And again, I thank him and I applaud him again publicly for that presentation. The unfortunate side of things is he covered a lot of things that I wanted to talk about in this panel, and so we're going to be stumbling a little bit and calling upon the audience. But in that vein of discussion, Jeffrey, during his talk at one point in time, gave a little bit of history of how he got into it and when he started blogging. And just as a curiosity, as a human condition curiosity, if you look at what you were doing back then, what your role was as a librarian, what your role was in scholarly endeavors, versus how you perceive your role is now, and he's not prepared for this question because he hasn't heard it before, what has been the transition for you personally in the journey that you've taken us all, quite honestly, with your insights?
Back in 2009, I worked as a cataloger in the back room of the library, and I had an office, and I just worked very quietly all day. I didn't bother anybody. I came to work, did the cataloging work, and went home. And then predatory publishers hit. I was on tenure track at the time, and I was always interested in finding interesting places to publish, so I was paying very careful attention to emails I received. And so when the spam emails started coming in, I was like, this is interesting, and a lot of them, there was a few even for library science journals, and some of those I would print out, and I kept them in a blue folder. And that was really how the list started. It developed from this blue folder where I printed out the spam emails and collected them. So now the library very kindly accommodated my change in interest. So now I'm the Scholarly Communications Librarian, and I was a cataloger, so it's a complete change in the last 5 years.
Are you happier now or happier then?
I'm happy both times.
So, as we get the panel moving, I would like to just hit a question head on because it's very much in the news with retractions taking place surrounding peer review. And we talk about predatory publishers and we talk about peer review problems. And they're not necessarily always linked. But there may be a link if people start thinking about predatory peer review practices, which we can address in the next session. Where I'd like to go with this question is, if you look at peer review and you look at predatory is saying, okay, we'll publish you in 10 days, 7 days, overnight. Something like PeerJ, and I'm in no way inferring PeerJ is in any way predatory. PeerJ is a format where you publish a paper and it's peer review in a dynamic peer review they're following. So The panel, the question I'd like to ask the panel is, if you look at predatory and just the fact that we label predatory or unscrupulous or other things because of the nature that they're publishing articles without a peer review or without rigorous peer review, what are the steps between that and post-publication peer review or other creative models that are out there? Meant to be a provocative question, and maybe Hazel, do you mind taking that first?
No, that's fine. So I think one of the benefits of online publishing, and obviously open access is part of that, but not exclusively about open access, is that we do have the greater opportunity to experiment and innovate around peer review. So obviously there's a number of experiments that have taken place, particularly in the last 5 years or so, around open peer review experiments, both pre-publication and post-publication. I ran a couple of experiments myself around open access books a couple of years ago. And one of the things I think is interesting is it sparks debate. And I think peer review is not perfect, but it does work pretty well as it currently is, but that people are frustrated. And if I think back to many conversations I've had with authors in my entire career, has been how long it can take. And things have sped up, people and publishers have looked at what they do to see how they feel. But at the end of the day, authors really value what it is that peer reviewers contribute to their research. I've got some data I can share later in terms of that, some data that we collected earlier this year on this aspect. But I think peer review innovations is important, that we shouldn't necessarily continue doing what we've always done because it works okay, because there are always ways that we can improve and innovate, whether that means being faster or whether it just means being more efficient or look at things in new ways. And so Nature, for instance, has run some open peer review, double-blind peer review experiments this year. And I think there's many more types of experiments that can be done. And we should always, with everything we should always question and make sure that we are always addressing the needs of authors, but making sure that we still maintain the quality standards that are integral to what we do.
So, provocative for Jeffrey. Say a traditional, pardon the expression, predatory publisher decides that they're going to put a blog-like component behind the paper that is a post-publication place where people can offer peer review. And that muddles it somewhat, and they can then say, well, we are offering post-publication peer review. What is the fingerprint of a predatory publisher or an unethical publisher or whatever label you wish to use that will then keep them under that same category, if in fact they are offering open peer review on their journals?
Well, if they're offering open peer review, it's great that they want to experiment and try new things, because I support the experimentation. If we can find a better model for peer review, then we should go with that. There is one publisher that's on my list. It's called Scientific Research Publishing, CIRP. It's based in China, and they have they've instituted a comment section. I think it's discuss DISQS. You can discuss comments at the end of the articles. I do think that they have stricken some of them. They don't allow all of them to stay there. So I support them trying to get better if they can, and I support post-publication peer review experiments. Not all of them have been successful. I've documented some failures of some of them in the blog.
And Gordon, from a large society point of view, like IEEE, how is a large society like IEEE prepared to respond to predatory practices? I know that you may wish to bring up some experiences, and maybe we can do that now in this type of conversation.
Sure. IEEE is a roughly 400,000 member professional association. Our fields of interest are electrical engineering, computer science, electronics, and closely related areas like telecom, applied mathematics, physics. And we run roughly 1,500 conferences a year, most of which turn out proceedings, the publication that comes out of the event. About half of them are run by IEEE units, and the other half are run by people outside of IEEE, universities or associations. And we are lending our name to those conferences, and we're lending some bodies to the Technical Program Committee, which is basically the editorial board for our conference. So that's a very decentralized model. We don't have 1,500 conferences doing exactly the same thing in their technical program development. We have maybe 30 or 40 variations of how the technical program is developed. So there's a great deal of freedom in that. There's also a great deal of risk in that. And we discovered a few years ago that not everyone was behaving in a way that was in IEEE's best interest. And I'll give an example. Someone wants to run a conference, so you take these two variables that IEEE is the biggest publisher in the electrical engineering conference space. And then you find parts of the world where engineering graduate students are required to publish X number of papers per year. Many slices of electronic engineering and telecom and computer science are very cutting edge, so it's acceptable to submit to a conference instead of a journal because you want to get your new idea out there very quickly and stake a claim on it. So a conference paper has the same degree of respectability as a journal paper in many slices of electrical engineering. So some entrepreneurial folks stepped into this realm and took advantage of that situation and recruited authors heavily. The peer review was perhaps not what we were hoping for, and we started seeing evidence of this, particularly one conference in Canada where the conference organizer partnered with a local IEEE unit and recruited heavily in China, recruited authors in China. And it was implied heavily in the call for papers, which had not been exposed to us previously, that he actually didn't really care if you showed up to defend your paper or not. The paper registration fee was built into your full registration fee. So this is an extreme example, but this is what we might call a ghost conference, where someone actually rents a conference room at the university, advertises the conference. We don't know if 50 people showed up or 10 people showed up or nobody showed up. So luckily we've squashed many of those occurrences, but that's an extreme example of predatory publishing where the publisher, who is the person running the conference, is taking advantage of a situation that certain people are in order to produce a publication, make money off it, and then when we catch the conference organizer and we shut down the conference, the proceedings are not published in Explore, the papers are not published in IEEE Explore, our database. They're not indexed by Thomson or Elsevier. The paper was not published. The conference organizer disappears off the face of the earth, and each one of those students is out $400 or $600 or $800.
So in a large organization that does conferences, conference proceedings, publishes, is extremely well respected on the landscape. I can imagine there's several concerns from an IEEE perspective, or any large organization perspective. One is brand, one is integrity literature, and one is the membership, and so the membership doesn't get rolled over by predatory practices and other things. How, as an organization, do you decide what stance you take in trying to address these types of issues?
Well, we've taken reactive and proactive stances. On the proactive side, we have built educational programs to go out into our community and provide specifics about our expectations for peer review. We ask that you apply at least 3 reviews to each paper. We recommend single blind review. We recommend certain time periods for review of the papers, certain limits as to how many papers can be assigned to each reviewer. So we communicate these specifics, but on the reactive side, we've also instituted safeguards where we've looked at where our trouble spots were, and now we filter a certain number of conference proceedings that are coming into us. Roughly 180,000 papers a year are coming in, so we filter roughly 18,000, about 10%. And it's a prejudiced sample. We are looking at places where we know we've had trouble before, and we subject those papers to an additional level of review. We can't do the technical review all over again, a small volunteer body of us. So we limit ourselves to the quality of the written English and whether the conference paper is within IEEE scope and the stated scope of the conference. Then the proceedings are passed on to a subject matter expert who judges the publication as a whole. So we're not doing peer review over again, but we are doing an additional scan of the quality of those proceedings before we'll decide to publish them in our database.
So Jeffrey, back to you, and I'll offer a comment first, but in the online discussions that are taking place, whether it be Scholar Pigeon or other places, there is discussion about whether predatory is the proper word versus deceptive or other types of similar words that can be used. And my personal opinion is it really doesn't matter what word we use, but if you didn't coin the term, and this is my opinion, if you didn't coin the term predatory, a word that has such emotional affect associated with it, today we might not be talking about this. We probably would because it would have swelled anyway, but the idea that a term like predatory was used, everybody talked about it immediately and it gained a lot of traction. Would deceptive, and this is just a rhetorical question, would deceptive publishers have gotten the same traction as predatory publishers? So as you read these comments, and considering that you did coin the term, it's anybody could have coined the term, what are your thoughts about the ideas around whether it's deceptive or predatory or other things? I'll add one more thing, again, my opinion. There are certain publishers or certain activities, and as we get into the office services in the next session, there are certain activities that are just not simply deceptive. They truly are predatory, and the label fits. But with that, I pass it over to you to see if you have any other comments.
Yeah, I have been closely following comments on the Scholarly Teaching blog, and first of all, I don't always use the term predatory. I sometimes use synonymous terms, sometimes just to avoid the repetition. The lawyer at the university doesn't like the word predatory, especially in the context of an individual publisher. So I frequently use the term questionable publisher, questionable journal, and the lawyer is happy with that because you can question anything you want. But I coined the term in summer of 2010, so it was 5 years ago, and it was in the Charleston Advisor library journal that I used to write for. And it's a journal that serves libraries. It provides reviews of electronic resources that libraries buy. But I was writing reviews of, that's where I started to write reviews of open access publishers. And the person that helped me coin the term was Bill Cullen, who's the guy who used to own Haywood Press. He sold it to Taylor Francis a few years ago. And he's been a mentor to me since before then and to this day. Now, in terms of predatory, remember that I'm an academic librarian and we have a tradition of serving the users of the library and being the users. So from that angle and that perspective, I saw that this new type of publisher was being predatory towards researchers, towards people who use libraries, university faculty, and graduate students and postdocs. So that's one of the reasons we chose the predatory term. It stuck. It also had the advantage of being alliterative, PP. So I realize it's not a perfect term for the concept, and the publishing industry has changed, and predatory publishers have changed. It's not the perfect term, but it's stuck. And for lack of a better term, I'm just going to keep using it unless I'm talking about an individual publisher. I'll say questionable, just to keep myself out of trouble, keep the lawyer happy.
So in Jeffrey's talk, Hazel, Jeffrey addressed a lot of the issues of the damage that predatory practices are taking on the toll of literature and the toll of publishers. Perhaps from your point of view, might you want to expand a little bit upon what types of things, how predatory is really damaging the integrity of the literature from a large publisher point of view, and then Gordon will potentially ask you the same question from a large publisher / organization's point of view. But first, Hazel.
Can I pop up and
Sure, please.
asked me to talk about the impact of predatory publishers on Nature Publishing Group and others. I won't try and use a term, otherwise we'll get into semantics again. But what I thought I would do is take a step back first, and I thought it would be useful to share some of the data that we've been collecting at Nature Publishing Group. We're really quite obsessed with the idea of really making sure that what we do really meets the needs of authors. In a similar way, I guess, that Jeffrey mentioned, that as a librarian is really thinking about researchers and their needs. And so for the last few years, we've been running an annual survey, really trying to really uncover the change in perceptions and values of authors. Because actually I think sometimes it's really easy for us all to make assumptions about authors, make assumptions about researchers, and many of the times they're actually completely true. But we need to remember that actually as publishing evolves, as the research community evolves, as the outside world evolves, that we need to make sure that we really keep up to date and really focus on actually what are all of us really about. And it's about research, and it's about really understanding our authors and making sure we address their pain points, but also make sure that we identify where we can help, what we can do. I'm not going to go through all of this data, but all of this data, the presentation and the data itself is available on Figshare, and I'm happy to talk to anyone outside the session about any of the data that we have. But I thought I would share with you this piece of data from the slide in particular, from the presentation in particular. And in many ways, I don't think there's any surprises here. So this is we're really trying to understand what factors affect where authors publish. So the whole survey was about 20,000+ researchers. We had about 18,000 from the STEM subjects. You can see here that the reputation of the journal is by far the most important aspect for authors when they're choosing to publish. But I don't think any of this particularly is a surprise for us. And you can see actually there's a huge long list of things. And I'm sure that we could really have covered an awful lot of things. But actually, I think one of the things that was interesting about the data that this time we started to look in terms of, well, what does reputation of a journal really mean? And I think this then ties into the idea of, well, what's a predatory publisher and who are they and what are they doing? And so if I skip ahead in terms of what do authors see as contributes to the reputation of a journal. Again, some of these things aren't surprising. There's a strong bias towards the impact factor, and most of this data here is from the STEM subjects, and the humanities is somewhat different. But actually, I think what's really positive from this, and again, hopefully it's surprising, but I think, as I say, it's really useful just to remind ourselves of these facts, is that consistency of quality is really important for authors, as is the quality of peer review. So this touches on what Don brought up earlier, in terms of authors really see the value and importance of these two pieces. They are only two factors in the bigger picture, and actually as part of the comments that we receive from authors, all sorts of things come up, and whenever we talk to authors, all sorts of things that come up. As I say, we can talk about these things afterwards, but ultimately from NPG's main concern is, as we discussed, is that the impact of bad practice, whether they're deliberate or otherwise, to be honest, have on the progression of science and our authors, because our authors our readers, are the research community, and they are crucial in this in the debate. So we ourselves obviously are committed to quality, standards, and integrity in terms of research, and obviously in terms of scholarly communication. And publishers and editors need to continue to raise awareness of these issues to help authors from being deceived. So Nature has published several articles, several news articles and blog posts over recent years, and other journals have obviously done similarly. And likewise, our editors are often out talking to researchers in labs, whether that's here in North America, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Asia, everywhere in the world, that they're out there, and it often comes up as topics that our editors often receive questions about other journals, their experiences, many of the types of things that's already been discussed today. Several years ago, I worked with trade authors. It feels a very long time ago now. And the reason I bring it up is because actually many of the authors I worked with were aspiring first-time novelists. So they had their day jobs, they were working in their spare time, maybe in their spare bedrooms, working on their baby, their joy. They wanted to publish this book that had been burning inside them for a long time. And it was a time when there seemed to be an increasing number of deceitful publishers that were out there that were targeting the hopes of these first-time novelists. were targeting them, had very deceitful practices, and they would come to us and seeking advice on a very similar sort of concept of sort of a blacklisting the world of trade publishing. And what strikes me is that while the two areas of publishing are somewhat different, obviously trade publishing has different drivers to scientific publishing, but actually I think one of the things that strikes me is that one of the benefits we have in scholarly publishing is that we are a community, the research community exists, and in that way we can work together, because actually in terms of predatory publishing, by editors and publishers, as we say, making sure we keep up to date, but also librarians, societies, funders, senior PIs, making sure that they really understand these issues, keep themselves up to date on these sorts of things. Anyone who may be advising authors on where to publish, because actually I think sometimes it is easier to think, well, everyone knows where to publish. Certainly some authors I visit will have a list stuck to their wall in their office, maybe a dozen journals, potentially even ranked in order, and they only publish in that set, and that's what their peers expect of them, that's what their colleagues down the corridor expect. But actually, not all authors have that same sort of list. There's obviously, if you're publishing interdisciplinary research, I think interdisciplinary is a really important issue to address, because actually, as an author, you may know where to publish for when you're publishing in your key area, but as soon as you move out into maybe interdisciplinary areas, there may not be your sort of the typical place where you could look to publish this research. And I think that may particularly where authors may be stumbling and be seeking advice in terms of, well, actually, there's this piece of research I've done, and it doesn't necessarily fit in terms of where my peers are publishing, where I normally expect to publish. But I want to make sure I publish it in a place that's going to reach my widest possible audience. And so where do I do that? And that's in particular when they'll start thinking about all of these types of factors that I showed briefly, thinking about what does good look like outside of my core area. And I think that's why it's particularly important to make sure that we all make sure that these issues are aware, so that's actually authors, which is the most important thing here, the research community is the most important thing, and making sure that we all do what we can do. And while obviously awareness may be only one solution to tackle authors being deceived, hopefully it helps go some way in terms of progression in this area.
That's great. So while I'm fixing this back, Gordon, what I was going to ask was from a large organization that has a huge membership base and that is, I'll categorize it as a membership organization that is also a publisher, as opposed to a publisher that has a following. How does the idea that predatory out there, from the consistency of the literature point of view, do you feel that it's driving membership better, the people that they need to belong to a large organization and really know where quality resides, or is it not really having an impact? So how is predatory changing the business model of IEEE and the spectrum of membership?
It can affect us in both ways. When I say both, I mean membership and just running our business. We're a non-profit, but that doesn't mean we don't make any money. Our membership, the loyalty of our members is incredible in terms of the longevity of membership. In many non-profits, people tend to drop out after 7 years or so, and our average membership goes far beyond that, or the duration of membership. And part of that is because of the perception of quality of the standards IEEE espouses, the standards we develop, the scholarly literature that we produce, the conferences we run, the charitable work we do. There's a great deal of loyalty, and it's based on the perception of quality. So for membership, and also for the reputation of our database, which is a subscription database, research database. If the word starts to get out there in the community of research librarians, who are primary subscribers to IEEE Explore, that we are having issues with quality and that we don't have the best electrical engineering research or computer science research, And our partners start to believe that as well. By our partners, I mean our downstream abstracting and indexing partners who have to apply keywords to our content after it's published and drive traffic back to IEEE Explore. The loyalty of our members and the loyalty of our subscribers can be effectively destroyed if we don't address the issue of how we handle the approaches of these predatory publishers. So we consider it a problem serious enough that if we ignored it, it could have brought IEEE down. That's the level that we see this problem. That's the level at which we approach this problem.
Absolutely. And I'm going to open it up to the audience in a second, but as a provocative, looser question of each of you, we've had some talk from Jeffrey, we've talked about a bit among ourselves. If you were to have a crystal ball in front of you, where in fact is all this going? And I'll leave it with Jeffrey, since he may have a more authoritative vision.
I don't know where it's going, and I don't know how much longer I can keep publishing my list of predatory publishers, and I wonder what will happen if I unpublish them. If I stop doing this, I can't leave the list there. I have to remove them all completely. The thought of stopping has entered my mind, especially in light of some of the recent scholarly kitchen posts. What really needs to change is over-reliance on bibliometrics and over-reliance on quantity as a tool for academic evaluation. If those things would change, I think it would get a lot better, and there is some pressure to change those things. A lot of people overseas love bibliometrics. They like having a number. They like having a number that's calculated outside of their country, where nobody in the country can manipulate it. It's completely foreign. And managers, academic managers, like using bibliometrics because it's a number that somebody else calculates, and it's fair to everybody. So things like you have to publish 2 articles in the Scopus Index journal. Those things are what's driving a lot of what's going on. And not that Scopus Index journals are predatory, but there's paper mills that are working on that people can use to get that, to get those publications. So that's a hard question. I don't know the answer, and I don't know what will happen if I stop doing this.
So, I guess the outcome of stopping is what keeps you awake at night. What keeps you awake at night?
All sorts of things. What keeps me up at night? I think probably to turn around in terms of, I think, predatory publishing, I think we need to remember that actually, I think why it's so difficult to envisage what it's going to look like in 2 years' time, where we'll be, what that crystal ball looks like, is actually that there's so many things that are changing, so many things that are in flux at the moment. So obviously open access is growing, there's innovations in all sorts of areas, there's reliance on impact, and by impact I mean in terms of societal impact, not just in terms of impact factors. So there's a variety of different things that are changing in the research community, which means that actually by looking at where are we as a whole industry going to be in maybe 5 years' time, I think it's harder to judge, and what role that means, that not necessarily role, but how big a threat predatory publishing will be in 2 or 5 years. I think there's so many variables, it's hard to say, but I think if we probably as an industry, one of the things that legitimate, if that's the word, publishers perhaps don't do as well as they should do is actually about explaining what they do. So obviously peer review we've spoken about is a really, really important aspect that publishers do, but it's not all of the things they do. And often when you talk to authors and you ask them what do publishers do, and they'll think about peer review and they'll think about editing, and maybe they'll say something about this marketing or dissemination. But I think one of the things that from a cross-stakeholder project I've been involved in for the last few years in the UK has been really interesting is that actually publishers do an awful lot of things. Editing is more than just editing, and authors don't always understand those aspects. And I do wonder whether actually as an industry we need to be better at explaining all the things that we do, and actually all those things that go into producing high quality research, because then actually it does help
authors also understand which publishers aren't doing those things. And obviously it doesn't always mean if a publisher's not choosing to do something that makes them in any way lesser, but actually it means that authors can understand what they are getting and make more informed choices as to the types of publishers that they're publishing with.
Gordon?
Well, I think our choice will come down to do we concentrate our energies on going after the bad publishers or educating authors? It could be a game of whack-a-mole. If you're going after these publishers, if you're able to, through massive effort, shut them down, 3 more spring up in their places, you have to know who they are, but that word has to get to the author community. If you want to put a drug dealer out of business in your neighborhood, get everyone in your neighborhood to stop taking drugs. And we have to get to our authors, we have to get to the author community and say, stop supporting these bogus journals. It's harder to write for a good journal, so you have to do the work. There's no easy way to get published the way you need to get published.
And again, a prelude to the next session, which will address that in some regard. So I open up to the audience and just throw out a question. What do you, as the audience of this session, find most despicable about the landscape of predatory publishing? What really irks you, whether because of your own workflow or just the predatory nature of what's going on? For me, what irks me the most is the fear that the integrity of literature is at stake. It literally is at stake. And if an author, as Jeffrey has said, and I say many times, if an author cannot tell that one article is real and the other article is fraud or mischievously derived, that's dangerous for everybody and everything, and that's what scares me the most. That's all. Other despicable comments? One of the challenges of Google in general is that they have an internal philosophy of being all-inclusive and finding everything. Jeffrey, do you have any thoughts on that? Or?
No, it's a really good point, and Google Scholar aims to be comprehensive. I think it's also the most used academic index, and we as librarians do try to direct our patrons to specialized index, PsycInfo, ABI Inform, and all these specialized indexes. We try to get them to use those, and there's also the list of journals that are indexed in those abstracting and indexing services. We try to get them to use those as whitelists too. These are good journals to submit to because they're indexed in this top index. And those indexes like EBSCO, they do vet what they include. At the beginning, they didn't know how to handle predatory journals, but now a lot of them have policies and they've removed a lot of journals from their indexes. Even Google Scholar is not transparent about what it includes or what its policy for what it includes is. But that journal that I gave the example of the mathematical proof of karma, I cannot find that article in Google Scholar, so I know that there's some journals that they don't include, or at least some articles that they don't include, but I don't know what it is because they're not transparent.
I pick up a point about the New York Times article. So I think it's a really interesting one. It's somewhat related, but I guess in the purpose of this talk to be about exploring areas around the whole area of predatory publishing, is that there's a variety of different organisations that have been set up in order to educate the press. So actually in the same way that there are issues in making sure that authors are aware of the challenges of bogus publishing or predatory publishers, it's also around actually educating the press. So obviously you can tell I'm from the UK, and we have our tabloid newspapers in the UK, which they became a real problem that some of our tabloids would be claiming headlines with something like such and such causes cancer, and the public would be, go into panic. It was bogus research, and so there's been a variety of different organisations who have set up that, in collaboration often with the research community, by identifying experts in certain subject areas, so the press can go to these particular experts or to these particular organisations to fact check, to verify whether something is good science or not. There's also, so Sense About Science is one of these organisations, and they do some interesting work. They have some fact sheets about peer review to educate the press and other people and the public in terms of, well, actually, what does good science look like? And then to educate journalists to know you shouldn't be writing stories unless you can identify that it is a peer-reviewed journal. And in terms of your article, you should always cite the journal. This was a practice that wasn't happening before in the UK. As I say, in some ways this is the example of something where the UK is based on Europe. Actually, I think more broadly it's an issue in terms of making sure people, the public in particular, if something is claimed in the news, that they can actually go through and read that research themselves, and they can understand it in the context. And as a result of that, things are significantly improved. It doesn't mean we don't have provocative headlines in our tabloids anymore at all. What it does mean is that there are links to the research and that journalists are better informed. And peer reviews is one of the many fact sheets that they can have. There's also ones about statistics as well. Obviously, statistics is a huge issue. You can spin statistics in all sorts of ways, and making sure that people, and journalists in particular, understand how to interpret statistics and not to draw the wrong conclusions of something I think is incredibly important and goes beyond just predatory publishing.
Education is a strange word. We've been educating authors, or trying to educate authors, with significant efforts for years now about good publication practices, ICMG guidelines. And it's a lot for the average author to take in, especially East Asian authors who are becoming aware of Western guidelines in greater proficiency. But when it comes down to the pressures that they are under to publish, the resonance of good publication guidelines, this guy has a paper for me. Good publication guidelines, this guy has a paper for me that I can buy. At some point in time, it has to come down to the author. And the next session that we'll be talking about comes out of my frustration that I have spent a lot of time, months in China, doing workshops and other things with Editage, and I just see that we are only scratching the surface and it isn't having an effect. And so education, while it's extremely important, is not getting to the issue, and we need to come up with another solution. And that solution actually has to be, in my opinion, at point of service, where the author has to make a choice. This website or this website, which one should I go with that is the ethical one or the good publication practice one? That's what we'll be addressing in the next session. It's very important for people to Google themselves and see what is actually out there about you. It is absolutely important. It may be humbling, but it's absolutely important to be able to identify these things, because you would not know otherwise unless an industry colleague flags it for you. And Jeffrey, you might have some thoughts of these scanning programs and how authors can help themselves. I know a lot of universities are actually filtering these emails from known sources to try to reduce the email burden coming at faculty just in these scans. Do you know of any other ways that individuals can protect themselves?
I get that question a lot from people who find their names on editorial boards and what can they do about it, and usually by the time they contact me, they've already tried to get their name off by emailing the publisher, and the publisher doesn't respond to the emails or refuses to remove their name. So I always advise them to go to the university council and write an email on university letterhead. And that often doesn't work still. That's truly predatory behavior. That's when the term predatory really fits, is when they exploit researchers in that way. And they do it generally with people from top universities. My university does have a filter for email. The Science Publishing Group, the Karma paper that I mentioned during my talk, you can't access their website from my university's domain, and their emails go to the spam filter. So universities are filtering, and I hope they more do with it. Filtering programs are expensive though for universities to buy, but they do save a lot of time.
So with that, unfortunately, with the interest of time, I have to close to keep everything else on schedule, but I want to thank the panel, Jeffrey, obviously, Hazel, Gordon, and myself, Don Samuel, for a great session and